It's my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Jamie Mayo. And you may have not seen her, because usually you'll find her in the sound booth back there, in the back of the room, as she volunteers at least once a month to do the video media portion of our service. So what you see on our walls, Jamie will be responsible for that. She's also an excellent storyteller. For those of you who do not know anything about her, she's been a librarian for the Kansas City Public Library for 15 years, and telling stories for just about as long as that. And so writing for her has long way been a way of making sense to her about life in the world and all the swirling shadows within her. So weaving stories from the details of her life and sharing them with audiences in the Kansas City area and around the area and beyond have become an interesting journey for her for the last several years. So Jamie is a member of the National Storytelling Network, as well as the Healing Story Alliance. She loves working with other people to help them unwind the stories that they've been handed to them that don't fit them, and to claim the stories that light them up. And who doesn't love a good story? So we're honored today. Her title of her talk is Anthem, Activating Our Voices, which is what we want to do. So help me welcome Jamie.
They dry my mouth out. It's unfortunate, but there it is. So, I have used words to change my life. Words that I couldn't quite believe, but I really wanted to. Every one of the songs that you are hearing this morning are my touchstones. They're what call me home, and they're what helped me get there. I've sung them loudly to myself while driving my car, while vacuuming my floors, while dancing around my living room. And they have led me home, over and over. So, I am a storyteller, one who is filled with silences, one who struggles to hear what is fluttering around in those silences. And this weekend marks the beginning of LGBTQ Pride Month. And I want to share with you one of my stories in honor of all of those of us who have had to struggle to find room for who we are in the face of silences, in the face of hurtful words, and even in the face of violence against who we are. For any reason that has been made up to diminish us. Because we are black or brown, because we are female or male the wrong way, because we are gay or bisexual, because we do not fit into the binary at all, because our path to God is an abomination in somebody's eyes, or because we don't even see a path to God at all of that. So I'm going to tell you one of my stories. I call it Silenced, although sometimes I forget to call it Silences, but there you go, pretty close either way. For me, it all started right here, right over there. I was sitting in Sunday service, and my phone went off. And so I pulled my backpack out from under my feet. I'm zip, 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 trying to find the right pocket. Finally, I pulled my phone out and I silenced it. I noticed that it was my friend Laura calling as I slid it into my jacket pocket. And I made a mental note to myself to call her back as soon as service was over. But then I got in my car and I forgot, and it wasn't until I was driving on the way to the grocery store that I remembered. So I pulled it out, I thumbed it on, and I hit the voicemail button. And there's Laura's voice. Jamie, I'm just calling to see how you are. I just heard about the shooting in Orlando. I pulled my car over to the side of the road and I slammed it into park. Because our story, our minds are wired for story. And mine had just taken 4 disparate facts and created a complete narrative. My best friend, Lee Ann was down in Florida at the very time that she called in Orlando. And it hadn't been that long since the shooting at the Jewish Community Center here in Kansas City. And my best friend Lee Ann is Jewish. And my friend Laura is calling me to see how I am. I started punching, trying to get the call back to work. And finally, there is Laura's voice. Laura, what's going on? She said, well, I thought you would have heard. And I said, no, I haven't heard what's going on. She said, well, there was a mass shooting at a gay club in Orlando. And I just felt myself like wrapped in this cocoon. I couldn't feel the words that she was telling me because all I knew is that my friend was okay because she wouldn't have been there. And I didn't really understand why she was calling to check on me. And I didn't get it the next day when I picked my friend Juliana up from the airport, and she was telling me how hard it was to be down in Orlando after that shooting with her family, and every TV in the house was on and nothing but news of that shooting, and no one was asking her how she was. And I didn't get it the next day when I talked with her after work, and she was telling me how hard it was to be at work, and no one asking her how she was. The next day, I was listening to NPR, and they were telling the story of those first responders and how they walked into that club after the music had been silenced, after the gunshots had been silenced. And there was nothing but the sound of ringing cell phones. And I finally got it. And I also got why I would never have expected my family to call and check on me. Because I had been complicit in the silence around my life and my family. I had come out to them when I was in my early 20s, and then I had just backed away because I didn't want to lose them, and I feared that I might. And I knew in that moment, with all of those voices that had been lost, that I couldn't lose mine anymore. I could do something about mine. And so I began to work to bring back everything up that I had shoved down inside of me, all of those silences, all of those missed pronouns, when to have used them would have revealed that I was gay. All of those conversations I never even entered, because to do so would reveal that I was gay. And I just felt all those memories coming up, and I was learning to embrace them and speak in ways that I hadn't spoken before. And then it was all put to the test when I went down to visit my family a couple of months later. I was driving to St. Louis, and when I got there, St. Louis is the northern border of my childhood. When I got there, I felt like I was driving into a membrane, and it was not something I had felt before, like I was entering a different land. And I just never felt it before. But finally, I pushed through, but all of that work that I had done lay scattered in the road behind me. And by the time I got down to southeast Missouri, I was as silent as I had ever been in that place. When I walked in the door, I could smell all the wonderful smells of the food my mom had always cooked for me when I was a kid. I could hear the laughter of my nieces and the clinking of the silverware against the plates as they set the table. And then we all sat down and we ate together. And we laughed and we enjoyed each other's company just like we always do. And when we were finished, we cleared off the table and we played games together. And that's how our visits usually go. Well, the next morning, my other brother, who lives on the East Coast, was flying in. And my dad decided that he would take advantage of having all of his children together for the first time in a really long time to talk about what he wanted done with his stuff when he died. And so the following morning, after we had finished our traditional breakfast of waffles and bacon and sausage, after we had cleared the table, coffee smells still in the air, dishes sticky behind us, the five of us sat around that table that we had sat around for almost every meal of my life growing up. And my dad made his first pronouncement. I do not want my money leaving Bloomfield, which is my hometown. population of 1,823 and holding. And so Jeff and I are both like, well, you know, it's your money, Dad, whatever you want, we're good with that. And my brother Ryan is saying, sweet, because he still lives there. And so then my dad turned to me and he said, Jamie, your mom and I, we'd like you to have the house. And I said, Dad, but I'm not coming back. And he said, yeah, but Bluefield needs you. And before I could say anything in response, before I could even think of anything, he said, Kansas City doesn't need you, Bloomfield needs you. And with those few words, I felt like my father had taken away from me more than I had ever granted him permission to do. And I sat there, and luckily muscle memory kicked in. I sat there, silent face, silent throat, silent body. And I can't tell you anything else that was said after that moment. But when I could finally leave, the meeting ended, and go up to my room, I shut the door behind me. And I did something that I had never done before, that I had only done one other time in that place. I curled up in a fetal position on my bed and I sobbed. And just like the last time, I put the pillow over my head so that no one would hear me. When I could finally breathe again and my body stopped shuddering quite so much, I did something I had never done there before. I picked up my cell phone and I called 3 of my friends in succession, and I invited them in there, into that place, to hold me in the fullness of who I am. I had 2.5 days left to go before I could leave gracefully. And when that morning finally came, I was up early, I had my car packed, the dew on the grass was still there, and my mom and dad were standing beside the car, and they were kind of leaning in, and I could feel their love for me pouring in and filling up my car. And it was heartbreaking for me in a way because I could feel that in stark opposition to my need to get out of there so that I could breathe. Finally, they were done asking me when I would be coming back next, when they might see me, and telling me how much they had enjoyed my visit. And I put my car in gear, and I headed down the driveway and out to the road that would lead me home. And behind me, I could feel their love like a cord, stretching and thinning as I drove, but it wasn't until I hit St. Louis that I felt it let me go free. It took me 3 months to recover from this. And during that time, I was trying to pull myself back together, all of those pieces that I had worked so hard to get and that had scattered. It was 8 months, I think, before I felt like I could go back again. And there I was sitting at my dining room table, planning out my whole summer travel schedule between work and play. And I knew I needed to find time to go and visit my family. And so that's how I found myself driving back down to Bloomfield on Memorial Day weekend. And when I got there, our visit went just like they always do. We laughed, and we played together, and we had fun, and we ate. And it wasn't until the night before I was to return to Kansas City that I was alone with just my mom and my dad together around that table that we had eaten so many meals together at. And we were almost done with dinner when my father turned to me and said, "So, Jamie, why is it that you're going to D.C. again? I mean, besides to visit your little brother?" And there it was. The first ever invitation from my father to bring the fullness of who I am into his home. So I took a breath and I said, "We're going for the LGBTQ march." And my dad said, "What?" Okay, one more time. So I took another breath and I said, we are going for the Gay and Lesbian March. And my dad said, what? And I could feel my mom sitting beside me trying not to laugh because she knew she was going to have to say it in just the right decibel that he did. And so she said it. They're going for the Gay and Lesbian March. And I saw the moment that he heard it, that look of disgust that crossed his face. And then he said, well, I hope I don't see you on TV. And the thing is, I could breathe. I could still breathe. And so, when I found myself on the corner of 17th and I in Washington, D.C., surrounded by a sea of gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgendered and straight allies, all there, proclaiming the pride of who they are, I just let it wash over me. And I read all of the signs honoring all of the people that we had lost during that massacre at the Pulse Nightclub. And I let that fill me up too. And then I took lots of pictures and I plastered them all over Facebook just in case I had to make the night reunion. And I can tell you this, if anyone tries to silence me again, I'm not helping. So, I wanted to just share with you the power that words have. When I came here, I didn't think much of myself. I believed all of the stuff that was in those silences. And I really wanted to. I loved the message that was here. And it was those songs. I mean, I downloaded all of those songs and a couple more. I don't have time to tell you about all the songs. I didn't have time to have them play them all. But there's so many powerful songs here. And I used those particular songs to help me get my voice. I used my stories, and my stories use me. So I just want to say, words have power. And we can use them to create the lives that we want to live, the lives that will hold the fullness of who we are. Even when we don't really quite believe them, even when we just want to, that's enough. So my stories are interesting to me. Forever, I learned to tell stories. I'm a youth librarian, so I learned to tell stories to children, and I love that. I love to see their faces light up. And I love the way you can see when a kid is feeling something that they didn't feel before when they're hearing a story. But I had these stories inside me wanting to have some voice, like my voice. I could feel them in my body. And finally, I realized I couldn't do it alone. And that for me kind of ties into our core value today of oneness. We are all one and we are not alone. Although I think so many of us have felt like we are. So I got a storytelling coach. And it was more like, I would call her a story midwife. Because those stories were having some birth pains. They didn't want to come out. And they did, all at the same time. And then what I found is not just that. Once I got the story out, they weren't done with me. Because I find that my endings, they're still leading me. It's like, I say the ending, and then people are, like one of them was about writing a note to my niece so that like my grandmother, she died, and I didn't know who she was, because we have a thing about silence in my family. And I even asked her, so Grandma, really, I'd like to know more who you are. And she's like, oh, honey, there's really not much to tell. And that made me sad, and I realized I didn't want to be that when I died. I didn't want that experience. I didn't want my people that mattered to me to have that experience. And so I ended it with writing a letter to my niece, which I never did. But it's leading me. My stories are always leading me. And to go back to the first song, the dance, I Hope You Dance, I feel like when I'm doing this right, it's like a dance with the divine. I get up here and I'm like, I'm not really sure how this is going to go. But I know there's some piece of faith that comes through me. So that's my story. And they give me the courage to know myself in this new way. And so it really is a circular dance. It's like the story and then me and then the story and me. And I think that's okay. I'm taking a class right now called something like Values for the Future. And when I saw that title, I'm like, I need to know that because I have struggled for the last couple of years to figure out how I bring my voice into this world where so many voices are being shut down and devalued. But how I do it without adding to the noise and the chaos and the screaming and the anger. And it's not that I don't feel anger. I think if you're paying attention, probably all of us feel anger for some reason, some valid reason, pretty much all the time. But I didn't want it to end there. And so one of the things that I just got this week in that class, although I think he said it the week before too, but I just got it this week, is that there are 8 values that he's looking at, and listening is one of them, and there's 7 others. But he talks about values in tension rather than values in conflict. And I love that idea because he said, this is Doug Lippman, who's one of our best thinkers about story and the power of art and that kind of thing. So he's talking about these values in tension. And what he said was that when you say values in conflict, it sounds like only one of them is winning. And he showed us how, like freedom and equality versus democracy or capitalism and communism. It's like we all value freedom and democracy, and then we can get stuck in these places. And I feel like that's what's happening in our country now. I think we all value freedom and we all value equality, except we don't. But those two, there has to be a weaving of the things. The other thing he said was, when you tell a story, just have one pointer, you get people lost. And I'm like, okay, I need to hear that because I can tell I am starting to... But to me, it's like I made a conscious decision to just see if I could land this. There are these things, there's oneness. Oneness is the core value today. And that matters. And I decided to just go with whatever the core value was and make it fit with my story, and it so does. Because I am my father's daughter. I am from the place that I grew up. All of that's still in me. And yet there were other things that I didn't know how to bring there. And I had to leave there to find them. And yet those things are still, and how do I weave the values that I received as a child, which are lovely, and the values that I know now, which are powerful, too. And so, even though I was supposed to only do one thing, it feels to me like the one thing is in the weaving of these several things. And now we'll go back to my notes and see if I can figure out what it is. All right, so let me throw some quotes at you because I love quotes. One of them, and it will fit with what I've already said. This is a quote from Mother Teresa. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. And that's what I feel like is happening in our country. We all belong to each other, but we don't know it sometimes. But we do. It doesn't change it. And Brene Brown, I could follow her around and see her feet, just whatever. I'm here just in your presence, soaking it in. But she has written a book called, I think I did, here it is, Braving the Wilderness, The Quest for True Belonging. It is her latest book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. In fact, I have homework assignments, and that's one of them that you can choose from. All right, but she says, we're in a spiritual crisis, and the key to building a true belonging practice is maintaining our belief in inextricable human connection. That connection, the spirit that flows between us and every other human in not something that can be broken. However, our belief in that connection is constantly tested and repeatedly severed. But it doesn't change the fact that it's there. When our belief that there's something greater than us, something rooted in love and compassion breaks, we are more likely to retreat to our bunkers, to hate from afar, to tolerate bullshit, to dehumanize others, and ironically, to stay out of the wilderness. And she talks about the whole metaphor of the wilderness and what that is. And she said what all wilderness metaphors have in common are the notions of solitude, vulnerability, and an emotional, spiritual, or physical quest. And I would add, I think the wilderness, it's in here, and it's trying to listen to that and respond to that, and it's a dance that happens. And Joseph Campbell has a great quote that relates to that, which I actually threw up there. Or Steph did. I just asked her to. And it's this: if you can see your path laid out in front of you step by step, you know it's not your path. Your own path you make with every step you take. That's why it's your path.
Yeah. All right. That's awesome.
So, throwing all these things together, I feel like there's a call to us to bring who we are and to hear who other people are and to help hear them into being when they can't find their way as well. And if any single voice is missing, we're all less for that. So, that seemed like a great place to stop. So I will just say in closing that I invite you to join me in the wilderness to discover the wild beauty of your own soul, the wild beauty of all of humanity, and to answer the voice that is calling you home.